really inspired me as a young kid, a young child, to pursue art and biology. So these are examples of Elizabeth's work. There's not a lot known about Elizabeth. She was born in 1909, died in 1938. But she trained at the Art Institute of Chicago, and her artwork was exceptional in its iconic approach and the pen and ink quality, which is a medium that I love as well. And I also was drawn to Charles Harper, and you may be familiar with his work, very symbolic and minimalistic in its approach with bold colors and patterns. And I discovered this work when I was about 12. But most importantly, I had a teacher, Pauline Ronald, in high school, and she encouraged my nature art. She allowed me to complete assignments that other people were drawing houses, portraits. She allowed me to draw animals, and I did a lot of those. I'm not sure I even have them anymore. I have to look through some boxes at home, I think, but I spent hours in the library looking through books. Of course, there was no internet, and looking at black and white pictures and drawing what I was seeing. And in ceramics, I sculpted a boxfish out of slab clay, and I bent a metal coat hanger into a hexagon and stamped in the pattern of the scales of the fish. This is my mentor, department director at the University of Michigan, where I did my graduate work. And he was an important person to me and encouraged me to pursue non-human organisms. So this picture was taken with him with our moose head t-shirts on in 1980. So this is a typical assignment we'd start in graduate school the first year, and we teach this assignment as well at Hopkins. And it's a carbon dust drawing where you take a specimen. I chose the baboon skull. You draw it 1-to-1, and you faithfully illustrate it as you possibly can, as realistically as you can. And this is called carbon dust, where you shave down carbon pencils into a dust and paint it on a white surface. And you use erasers and you use carbon pencils as well in order to create the illustration. This was a technique that Jerry taught, which was called coffee stain. And you take used coffee grounds and dribble them across a clay-coated paper and let that dry. And then you just brush it off and it leaves this pockmarked pattern. And then you shave down sepia charcoal chalk and paint that on, and then use other mixed media in order to create your illustration. So this is kind of a tree trunk with some lichen and a Hercules beetle. And feel free to ask questions along the way. I'm happy to answer them as we go. So this I might consider my first nature mandala. This was a pen and ink drawing I did for my late father in '95. Unfortunately, he passed in '97. And it was his favorite flower. And much of my pen and ink work I dedicate to Jerry Hodge, who was a superb pen and ink artist, and to another artist, Craig Gosling, who I had my first job with. So this was the journey starting for me, led to 2012 when I began making mandalas. So a mandala is Sanskrit for circle and is thought to be a visual metaphor for never-ending life. The circular shape represents the earth and all that it contains, as well as the universe that surrounds it. The mandala is a symbol of one's own center, providing a path for understanding, accepting, feeling comfortable with, and completing life with oneself. So my brother called me in November of 2018 and he said, the monks are in town. And I don't know how he found them or how they found him, but over 7 days, they created this mandala. And how it happens is that they come to the site, they perform chants and perform music, and then they create this mandala from memory. And they start from the center, and they deliver the sand out of small pipettes, colored sand, and they let it flow out into the design, prescribed design, and they also indent the whatever they're creating, and you can see a beautiful close-up in the lower left of a lotus flower. So that's the great detail that takes place over 7 days. And once it has completed its use, they fold up the fabric with the sand and release it into a flowing body of water. And here's a South American woman creating her own floral mandala. One of my students took this. She's a kind of a world traveler and sent that to me. We know rose windows of Christianity across multiple religions and cultures that are for worship, ornamentation, decoration, and celebration. So it may not be fine art, but I surely hope it is fun art. And this is how my mandala journey started. So here's an example of a pen and ink drawing I would create. And I would consider beforehand, if possible, sort of where I might think the fins and the shape and everything might work together. And believe me, over time, getting started, there were lots of stops and starts till I figured out my method. So then color is added. The pen and ink drawing has been scanned into the computer. Lines are colorized, and then I begin to add detail, color, and highlights. And this was made in 2013. And the interesting thing about this particular mandala is if you know Photoshop and layers don't always allow you to do things that you want them to do because you can't really provide the sense of 3D things behind and in front. So I figured out a way of copying and pasting, cutting up, and putting the fish back together again so that it looked like it was a little more integrated. So, not like others, I still use a mouse. People use a Wacom tablet and a pen, but I can do things pretty much any way I'd like with the mouse. So I start with ovals. I have a sketch in mind. I create ovals and cut them up and create shapes. And here I've added flat color, and then highlights to the veins, and color and pattern to the wings. And there is a completed side to the butterfly's wings. And there is the full butterfly, copied and duplicated. And then I've placed it here on a butterfly bush. And you'll notice too that the flowers on the right-hand side, all those individual petals were made as single petals. I created the flowers and then put them all together and copied and pasted them into the kind of the stalk of the butterfly bush, and also used tie-dye for the leaves. And the red admiral butterfly has always been my favorite since I was a kid. So in the act of doing, serendipity follows, leading me down many unplanned and joyous paths. So my pen and ink is punctuated with dots and spots and squiggles in my professional work. And I use the same mark making thinking in my pen and inking. So here we have burrowing owls in the desert. And this is a close-up of Elizabeth Buxbaum's stipple and accent drawing. And I was drawn to that kind of a pattern and use of varying size of dots. And this is how I used it in the shell of the box turtle. And this is the diet of the box turtle. So here we are back at Charlie Harper. Charles, I guess I was supposed to call him Charles. Back in the day, it was Charlie. And so this is my homage to him. We're using bright colors and solid shapes, and you can see the dot detail in the on the upper right-hand side. So this was my looking for the way. It was an early mandala in 2013. And I guess I don't know how this passage or this journey began. I was looking for just a new way to tell stories about nature and incorporate habitat and morphology and interspecies connections, that sort of thing. And it just sort of began, and it's continued to this day. So this is an example of the patterns that I create: tie-dye, coffee stain, flame painting, comic book dots, and that sort of thing in order to create interesting patterns. So if you're ready, let's go on an eco trip and wander with wonder in nature. This was a picture my wife took of me when we were on a date before we were married. So there you have it. So my working method is that after I create my assets, I begin to just place them, think about certain patterns. Because this is a Pakistani spider, I used a Pakistani design, and just I try things out just to see what I like, and I sort of let the activity guide me. And I'm always open to suggestion. I try to dispense with my inner critic, and I just see where it's going to take me. And I think that's half the fun, or maybe it's most of the fun. So here are some Helioconus butterflies. And since the species are oftentimes, only identifiable or different from one another because of a leg hair or pattern on a wing, I created the single butterfly and then made 4 species out of it. So here we go into the garden. Welcome to my circle. These are some curved tiger lilies. And I have hosta, iris, and daylilies throughout my yard. And I can tell you right now that the squirrels this spring have found my hosta to be a nice salad bar. And these are yellow iris with tie-dye bumblebee wings, I'm sorry. And I find that the 6 and 8 symmetry is the most pleasing for me. And again, you can see some detail to the petal of the iris on the right-hand side. So daylilies are one of my favorites, and we all know them to be actually blooming for a day, sometimes longer, but they are a beauty for a day. And this is just a sunflower with the outer petals unfolding, and beauty unfolds from within. Some ruby-throated hummingbirds, and I repeated the shadow of that I created for the hummingbird and created some motion by cutting them up and putting them together. So this was interesting. I went online this week to find the exact species of this. I can't remember who supplied this photo of this pincushion flower. I couldn't find it anywhere. And so it kind of frustrated me. There were some like it, but I don't remember who gave me the photo, but it intrigued me enough that I wanted to do a mandala with it. And so the pattern within each of those quadrangle shapes are repeated in the background. So oftentimes I have to admit, I make things up. So this isn't really a real flower. I took some shapes that I had created and just wanted to see where I could go with them. What could I create? So those kind of swooping shapes created this flower blossom. And I put these butterflies on the outside. The same with this one, sort of mimicking a chrysanthemum. And I liked the way the spider shape mimicked the flower blossom itself. So we'll head into some butterflies and moths. And these are tiger swallowtails. And I remember these as a child. They were never, at least in Indiana, where I was, they didn't seem to want to come to the ground. They were always flying 2 stories up across the top of my house. But as you'll find them on tulip poplars that grow at 40 feet high at 20 years old is the first time they blossom. So that's why I wanted to kind of put these 2 together and create this mandala. Zebra swallowtail on bamboo. And some sphinx moths hiding in plain sight, being camouflaged by the maple leaves. So this is my 12 sphinx moth mosh pit. And what led next was just that shape. I just decided I'd see where it would take me. So obviously this isn't real, but I call it the butterscotch sphinx moth. So this is Jack Cody's work. I don't know what to see. Unfortunately, I'm sorry that this particular program kind of mixed up the text here on this slide. But Jack Cody was a graduate of the medical illustration department program in the middle 40s. He went on to be a psychiatrist in the early 60s. But he's well known now as the Audubon of moths. And his book, Wings of Paradise, is exceptional. And his watercolors are probably at least 30 by 20 high. And he has, since a child, he was interested in moths, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But he raised moths in his Hayes, Kansas home. He traveled the world, collected cocoons, and for 20, 25 years, he raised the moths in a specially kind of adapted bathroom and then painted them. And he's had shows at the Smithsonian. He had a show in the Natural History Museum in New York. And unfortunately, he passed in 2016. So it was Jack who told me that pursuing mandalas was a sign that I was comfortable with my life. And when he was 5 years old, he was outside, and he later made this statement: "It was really my first conscious experience of beauty." But outside as a boy at 5, he saw this Cecropia moth on the trunk of a tree, and he was mesmerized by it. All of a sudden, his parents called him home, so he went home. They went someplace, he came back. He saw a few kids in the neighborhood beating it with a stick, and it affected him, severely, obviously. I mean, he loved that, seeing that moth. And so over the next few years, he tried to keep that experience and that image of the moth in his mind. And about three years after that, his uncle took him to another place where there was a Cecropia moth. And that's where it all, kind of came together. So this is just an interesting moth that I found online, Brahman moth. And these caterpillars were just crazy looking. I had to do something with them. So I say, have aliens landed? No, they are Korean. So this is my personal beetle collection, to beat all. A lot of different kinds of beetles in there. And I grow Rose of Sharon anytime I can in my yard. In the springtime when the stalks come up, over the years I've collected them, put them in pots, transplanted them all over my yard. And so in summertime is when all the blossoms come. I'm a very happy person. So this is giving tie-dye a try. And your spirit is your true shield. So this is loosely based on a Exora shield bug of Australia. And I made this fantasy beetle up. It has very large shoulders anyway, but I called it Extended Deltoideus, meaning the deltoid shoulders, Phelpsii. And here's a Goliath attempt. And another. And in the background are 42 repeated, resized, and multiplied leaf icons to provide the background. So the gig is up here. We have early gigs in a pond and 4 watchful frogs below. And so patience, young grasshopper, when making mandalas. It is in the doing and being in the moment that is important. So I've always, since a kid, been intrigued with fabric and ornamentation. I grew up watching cowboys and Indians on TV, so I've always been interested in the Navajo, Hopi, and other Inuit and indigenous peoples' weaving and ornamentation. So I noticed that when I put these grasshoppers down, their legs, their serrated legs, made a pattern. So I stuck with that. And here's another example. The color in the middle is the same color as the eye spots on the giant swallowtail. And a box turtle, which I liked a lot when I created this one. And again, another happy accident. I created this devil's flower mantis, and I was placing some ferns, and all of a sudden the pattern that I was exploring was mimicking the mantis itself on its wings. So it's those happy accidents that I like. So a friend of mine showed me a picture of his daughter, who sent him a picture of a scorpion at night. she was at camp. And I took a look at the picture and I just was sort of inspired to go home and make something out of it. So that afternoon, it was a Saturday, I went home and made this image. So using assets again, I created another scorpion color and setup. And I created the design and arranged it 24 times around in the background. And lo and behold, the design created the same kind of triangular tipped tail as the scorpion itself. If you look closely, you can see that in the center. So homage to Jerry Hodge, teacher, mentor, and friend. So this was his pen and ink drawing of a longhorn beetle on Bird of Paradise. So this is my derivative, thinking about him. And another. And he was known for his gouache paintings. And so he had created this painting of tiger moth, garden tiger moth wings. And I did the same with my mandala. One of my students sent me a picture of a dahlia. And so I created this mandala with each petal separately and then built the flower itself. And here's my dalliance with skippers. Hidden in the petals, look carefully to find the butterflies. A colleague of mine brought in a seed pod from the velvet leaf, and I just found it intriguing. I wanted to know more about it, so I investigated a little bit further, found its flower, and then added the skipper butterflies. Yes. Oh, sure. So Bronwyn asked, how much do I do in exploring and researching the species? I do a lot. I search out, I have books and books at home. I've got my original golden book field guides from when I was 10 and 12, the little, 6-inch size ones, and go on the web. I guess I look for things that will tell me about the habitat, about their living habits, coloration, and I look for just an opportunity for creating something that I hope will be beautiful. And so I say it's interesting what the internet will provide to nature seekers. I never know what I'm going to find. I set myself up a task every weekend to create an organism. It could be a flower, it could be a butterfly, fish, whatever it is. And so I start that on Friday evening. I may have done a little bit of research during the week, but then preparing, creating good amounts of days on Saturdays, then see where it leads on Sunday. Some of them even sit. Whatever I create in the way of a mandala or an arrangement, there are some that are sitting for 6 months before I get an idea of what it is I want to do with it. And I kind of let the thing happen. Just whatever, I take a look at it, maybe it doesn't quite work, come back to it. Maybe I've seen something in the meantime that inspires me to take it further. So these are birdwing butterflies. So now we'll head into the water. These are clown triggerfish. And these are just some made up fish. You'll see out there right here in this one as a background. And so this is a close-up of the bedazzled scales I made for this fantasy fish. So my father was a fisherman. He freshwater fished. He went to Florida for saltwater fishing. And when I was about 13, a box arrived at my door, at our door. And so he said, hey, something came in the mail. So we opened it up, and what looked to me like a thorny yellow balloon with eyes was this porcupine fish he had caught and had taxidermed. And I still have that at home. My daughter reminded me this morning that it was in her room for a while, but now it's in my studio. These are Moorish idols. And meandering mandarin gobies. And so you can see on the right-hand side, a close-up of what one of the fish is, what it looks like. And this would be kind of an arrangement of pairs in 4. And I say, go be great in all that you do. Yes. In a sense, it's all, I'm sorry. So it was asked how much of these particular new mandalas are handwork and computer work. And I guess I'd have to say at this time, I'm still doing some pen and ink outlining and scanning that in, but I found that creating all my own shapes and objects and colors, as I say, I still start with ovals. And this is what comes of those ovals. And I build the fins, I build the bodies, I put the eyes on, but they're all just ovals or circles or whatever it is. And then having looked at the pattern of the fish, that's the other thing I investigate for my organisms. What is the recognizable pattern or morphology? You have a question? Photoshop, just Photoshop, and the oldest version I can hold on to. It's funny because I had to upgrade in my office, and so I got a new computer, and the Photoshop wants to do things I don't want it to do. I'm perfectly fine using it as I use it. So yes, and so I hope that answers everybody's question. So here we are striding right, and you might notice that kind of spiral curly cue was used previously for my whirligigs. So in a sense, I always keep in mind kind of an asset library. What have I used? What would work? I might even go back to previous examples of my layered files. I keep a large library of these things, and I say, you know, I made that circle, that curly cue, or I made that particular shape. I'll just go get it so I don't have to make it again. Yes. You know, yes. So I was asked, how do I keep my images fresh? And I hope that they are. I hope people find that they are. Um, I, I guess I've had a couple of periods where I felt like I was a little stale. And so I would feel that perhaps that particular approach wasn't working at that particular moment. So again, I guess I've felt like it's more in the process. I mean, I might spend an entire weekend on something that maybe isn't quite as successful as I'd hoped it would be, but I just put it in a file, right? I just keep it at the ready, and it'll come to me. So I hope that there is fresh looks to all of these and that they work for you all. So here's rock Plecostomus as a visual pun. We know that sucker-mouth catfish like to suck on rocks for nutrients. So I made some rocks that were Plecostomus. You can see them in the background. These are some poison dart frogs, and their camouflage is the fact that they are so well hidden is that the stripes in the leaves and the stripes in their bodies coincide. And these are some dart frogs that have a tadpole nursery up in bromeliad flowers. And these are kind of considered temporary pools. And so the eggs were laid, the tadpoles develop, and they crawl out of these spaces. I found that just to be really fascinating. And so I say, when venturing into murky water, don't be the ant. And so I've created these 6 horned frogs and repeating circles around this kind of the swirling water, and the highlights on the frogs draw the attention to the center. Another image with the swirling water. We'll head into some birds. I can see that the type got sort of messed up there. So this is a barn owl blue jay mob, and they banded together to protect the group. So this is mobbing behavior by crows, blue jays, other birds that keep predators, hawks, and owls out of their territory. But this one was interesting because I created this, you saw this owl before, and I use assets occasionally again. And when I made the shadow and rotated it around in the background, 2 shadows overlapped, made this bird that I thought looked like a crow. So I went with that and recreated that for the rest of the crows to be in flight. Plight of the woodpecker. We know that the ivory-billed woodpecker was brought to extinction by deforestation. But my Uncle Bud, in his later life, he was an ornithologist. When I was young, he used to take his daughter, my cousin Jenny, and I out in the field with him, and he would set traps at night, and we would see in the morning what had been caught and what he had banded. And so in 2006, he was ill, and unfortunately, I think he passed in 2008. There was this rumor that the ivory-billed woodpecker had been seen or noted in Arkansas swamps. And it excited him so much, to think that in his background and his profession that would come to light. But of course it didn't, or hasn't yet. Goldfish sunflower visitors. These are screech owls on night watch with a lot of leaves. There are a lot of leaves in there that I've put in. This is a barred owl that visited my brother's bird feeder, and he sent me the picture, and this mandala resulted. And these are great gray owls. I've never seen them. They're not in this part of our country. I would love to put them on my bucket list. I have these limber in the timber at a convention. So this particular weekend, I set the task of doing a hawk owl. And so I spent a good amount of time creating the bird, and then was ready to do some things with it. Early Sunday morning, I went to Target and was waiting in the parking lot, and the snowflakes were falling, and this came about. So I kind of cataloged that, did my shopping, went home, and put them in this setting. This is interesting. I don't know if you've heard about Rocky, the sawwood owl that went to the Rockefeller Center. But when they brought the big tree down for Christmas and Thanksgiving, they found this owl inside. And they were kind enough to take it back home to upstate New York. Now, what I found out later was the bird could have been in migration because that's along its route. But I want to believe what everybody else believed, that a good deed was done. And so here are some puffins and stuff. Repeating ovals in the faces, legs, chest, and even in the background, stony kind of appearance. Cattail, sandtail cranes. What's all the chatter? And what is the matter? They make a lot of noise. So we're going to go off site here a little bit. Influences from faraway lands. Pakistan truck art. I was looking through some Instagram posts and came upon trucks of Pakistan, and I had never seen anything like this. So I was just intrigued. And so I created my own Pakistan truck art with some iconic images that I created and then placed them. Made another. And made another. Then recently, a colleague of mine shared Chivas bus art, and this is from Central America. Bright colors, geometric shapes, and they've been doing it down there since 1920. Again, I was just mesmerized by what was there. So I started creating some Chiva art. So these are some butterflies in a garden. Of course, we're back to the Plecostomus, my favorite fish. So now we're going to take another detour. Since I was a child, I've liked little cars. And I have some of them that I had when I was 6 years old. So off and on, I still collect little cars, but I wanted to learn about flame painting. So I was in the Toys R Us in 1994, standing at the Hot Wheels aisle. Somebody comes up, turns out we became great friends. He's a hot rodder and has a couple of hot rods. And so we got to talking. He said, I know you're an artist. I said, yeah, I kind of gravitate towards these flame cars. He said, well, you ought to make your own. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get started. I was afraid of making mistakes. But in doing so, by now I've painted over 600 of these little hot rods and customs. And I also have painted little vintage race cars with stripes and numbers. So we go a little bit further. So this led me to want to write a book about the history of hot rod flame painting. And so I contacted 18 flame painters and was just so excited to be able to tell their stories, because if you go through the hot rod magazines and books, and for a while, they never told you who painted the car. You knew who built it, who owned it, but never who painted it or pinstriped it. And I felt that was wrong. I was going to right that wrong. So it was just a joyous opportunity. I went out to California for 3 weeks for a good part of the journey that the photographer and I took from St. Louis. I'm sorry, from Los Angeles up to San Francisco, and went into the flame painter shop. Spent 2.5 days there, talked with them. Paul shot photos. We hung out. It was just a great 3-week road trip. So this is Tommy Itchy Otis's 32 Roadster that he built and flame painted in 1992. And so while I was there, he said, well, come on, Tim, we're going to go for a ride. So he took me through Hollywood in a low slung hot rod. I had to sit the whole time with my head down. And by the way, he had his dachshund Nathan with him. And so Nathan and I and Tommy Itchy Otis drove around in Hollywood for a couple of hours. It was great. So here's Tommy pinstriping another car that he built. And those are called sword or saber brushes. And those are what the pinstripers use in order to paint the very thin, delicate lines. So I took that a little bit further, and you see on the left-hand side an example of my mentor, Rod Powell, who I featured in the book. I met him and kind of clicked with him, and we've kept in touch since. And he's built beautiful cars over time, flame painted them, is really world renowned. So I created these jellyfish with pinstripe tentacles. Here we have red and white koi, flame painting designs in the water and fins. And like a moth to a flame, I have embraced mandalas, and I have not yet experienced any harm. So newts of fire flashing their attire to their heart's desire. So further, we're going to look at Mexican horse blanket. What? Both. So again, me looking at ornamentation, here's Mexican horse blanket designs that were started in the 1800s. Used, of course, under saddles, but then worn as serapes and put over doorways and windows. And in the 50s, the hot rodders and the rat rodders who built cars used them as upholstery. And here's some pinstriping. This is called panel painting. And Larry Watson was 20 years old when he went to a Ford dealership and saw a Thunderbird and said, I gotta have that car, but it's just really too plain. I need to do something to it. So panel painting was started at that point, and it's been carried on in lowriders and other cars ever since. So these are my panel painted beetles, leaf hoppers. So here's a panel topper, leaf hopper, eye stopper. So we'll quickly jump over into steampunk. We'll bring in the funk with some steampunk. So some beetles around a gear-like sunflower. And then compared to a 2013 mandala I made with kind of mimicry involved. The one on the right then is 2018. Some file fish that have made it into some mandalas, but I felt like I needed to make a file fish. So there's my file fish with screws, files, and gears. Okay, so here we are. The Return of the Boxfish. This was the cover for a coloring book series I did. I did Animal Life and Garden Life for Schiffer Publishing. This was after my series of books came out. And so it's mindfulness in coloring books and mindfulness in art creation while living in the moment. Here's an example of the pen and ink drawing that I created for the book. So this is interesting. This individual contacted me through Facebook. And these are mandalas that are in a couple of patient areas in cancer building at Hopkins. And I donated those in, I think it was 2018. And she had been there and she sent me a picture. And she said, I just loved seeing them. It made me feel really good. And I was very appreciative that she sent that along. So here we are 27 years later. There's my sunflower on the left, a sunflower flame mandala on the right. And so what's next? I've been creating some rotatable nature panels that could be either displayed horizontally or vertically with the same kinds of symmetry involved. And this is a ladybug leaf litter hideaway. Do work that matters, that is hard, and that you are uniquely able to do. Do work that brings you incredible joy. Believe in your vision, knowing what others may not at first, and care about craftsmanship. The creation of art is a gift. It's expressed by all creative people, whether in art, music, writing, or dance. There is a definitive aha moment when the light comes on and you find your rhythm and flow. It is riding a wave of excitement, peering over the edge into the abyss of all things possible. It is a warm embrace of all your life's travels, experiences, influences, the highs and the lows, the spring's green and the winter's blues that culminate into a slice of creativity that magically emerges, or so it seems, and is set free. It is calming freedom. Opportunity abounds. In every art endeavor I seek flow and sit on top of its wave with open embrace of the unexpected to see where the journey takes me, and I wish this on each of you. These are the published books I have out now, right now, hardbound and coloring books. And I want to make a statement about this society, what it offers to all of you and everyone here, and the many exhibits and things that people can do and see. So when I came here last week to make sure my technology worked, Bronwyn shared with me Mary Banning's fungi, which are on the back wall here. So I wanted to go home and create something in homage to her. And she was a mycologist and botanical illustrator who was really unrecognized and unappreciated. And so I think it's important to support societies and look at their exhibits, you know, come here and enjoy nature in every set and way. So thank you for perching here with me while I tweet. I hope I haven't driven you batty. When chaos ensues, don't be stuck in the mud. Wriggle free, because life is short. Our center from where all derives, take a deep breath and remain calm. Go gently into the night to find things that provide insight. I wish you all fire in your bellies and passion for the art that you create. Thank you very much.